Well, welcome everyone to our London Threat Modelling Connect meetup. So this is our third meetup, I think now. So this is our very first virtual meetup. We are hoping to do throughout the year a couple virtual and a couple in person, dependent on people's availability and things like that. So this is the first virtual one. We're really pleased to have you all with us. Some of you may have met us in person at FretModCon or at previous local meetups, and we're really pleased to have you guys here. So, for those of you that are new to Threat Modelling Connect, we are an open threat modelling community. We're brought together by Erious Risk with a mission to secure the world's software starting right from the design stage. We have our online forum, which most of you already know about, and then we have our two major events each year, one in Europe and one in North America. We also have our local chapters, which are growing rapidly. So all across Europe and North America, chapters in your local areas that you can join in person or virtually. And we encourage you to kind of have a look at the other chapters' virtual meetups if you want to join as well, and share experiences there. And then I'm going to do my very best YouTuber impression. We would like to thank our sponsors, Erious Risk. So Erious Risk makes secure design the standard scalable practice for all digital teams, making secure design fast, reliable and accessible even to non-security users, thanks to their automated and AI augmented threat modeling solution, which is much easier to write than to say. They believe that threat modeling is like having a security superpower that builds in best practice right from the start. So thank you for championing Secure by Design, and thank you for supporting our growing community. Erious Risk is our main sponsor of the London chapter and of all of our Threat Modelling Connect events. They also have a free to use community edition, which I will post the link for in the chat for anybody that wants to give it a go. And without further ado, let's start with our content. So for any of you that don't know me, I am Stacey. I am one of the chapter leaders for the London chapter of Threat Modelling Connect, and also work for the Erious Risk marketing team. So I'm the non-technical member of the chapter, and I make sure things look pretty and I do the logistics. And I'll hand over to our more technical key members of the of the chapter, Katie and Omar, for the content. Thanks, guys.
Katie, I think you're mute.
That's a very solid start from me. But no, Stacey is more crucial than she lets on to be, I think. But yeah, my name's Katie. I work for IBM. I work in our application security team and do an awful lot of threat modeling. So hopefully we can teach you some useful stuff today.
Yeah, and I'm Omar Science. I'm a security engineer at Google. Used to be a security architect in the past, doing a lot of threat modeling activities. Now, in my role, I'm involved in supporting partners. So I'm a partner engineer across EMEA, and then I help them build and design services for their customers, and that includes threat modeling.
Perfect. So today's session really is looking at how do we talk to our C-suite about threat modeling? How do we show them the value? How do we get them on board? And really make it business as usual within any of the organizations that we each work in. The things we're going to look at having to cover today are a little bit of the trends that are going on in the cyber world today. What type of attacks are we starting to see? And then importantly, we're going to phase into how threat modeling works. So where does it fit in the DevSecOps lifecycle? What's the value it can continue to push further on the right-hand side? And then we'll get into what your opinion as a group is. We'd love to make it collaborative. So please just stop and shout and put questions in the chat as we go. But we'll come across the C-suite, who they are and how we can start to present value and get them on board and buying into threat modeling. So to start with the trends of cyber, IBM every year issue a cost of a data breach report. And actually, I think the call for the 2025 one was yesterday. But of course, I was on another call at the same time. So we've got the 2024 stats for you today. But the average cost of a data breach is growing. It's higher every year that this report comes out, and it's now sitting at 4.88 million. So that is the cost of losing data, reputational damage, loss of sales, all of those types of things when an organization faces a data breach. And Omar called out quite an interesting stat, which is where threat modeling is quite interesting, is actually when you've got a malicious insider inside your organization, that number's even higher. And it's often a really taboo topic. We often think of attackers as those politically motivated external people, but actually you also have to look inside as well. You also have to start saying who's got what access inside my estate and could anything possibly go wrong there? Because the damage, as we can see here, can be that little bit worse, which is quite key. We run a lot of sessions with school children and things like that as well, and we show them all of these stats, and they're always quite shocked by the number you can see on the right hand side, how long it takes to identify and contain a breach. So as you can see here, for those of you that don't know, it's sitting at 292 days. So if you need to scare your C-suite at all into doing more threat modeling and more security, these are some really great stats we can show to start with. But that number really comes from the fact that we don't often have the visibility. We don't often have the strong architectural designs. Our SOC aren't always aware of how our applications are offering. And therefore, if we can change a lot of that, that number can come down really quite significantly, which is exactly our goal today. So Omar, I'll pass to you.
Yes, so that leads very nicely into what we can actually see. And for that, I'm bringing this Mandiant trend report. So Mandiant trend reports, so Mandiant cybersecurity consulting company, which recently joined Google, as part of the active incident response activities, we produced this report to show a bit of details on terms of campaigns and global events that are impacting some of the customers. And what we've seen here is situations or scenarios where we actually have seen an active threat actor or group primarily doing some activities. So you can see from the report the number of activities that or the trends that we see, and some of them are not necessarily new. We have, for example, activity that has been running for over 3 or 4 years, and primarily which is related to the exploitation of stolen credentials as primary initial infection vectors. And this is not a surprise. Attackers primarily gain initial access through exploitation of those vulnerabilities, as you know, in the software, but also by having access to those credentials. A different situation is when we're talking about the cloud, for example, where we see more misconfiguration when, as part of this poor security implementation and practices, we have data or data repositories or cloud resources that are exposed to the public internet, as you can see on the left hand side, and also the attention that the financial motivated attacks continue to have year on year. So threat actors continue to be primarily motivated by getting these financial gains, and particularly ransomware campaigns that continue to be part of the biggest problems that we see in cybersecurity. And lastly, the evolution of the threat actor or their tactics to evade detection. As Katie mentioned, the amount of time the threat actors spend in the network or without those breaches being detected is what is driving a bit of the, on the detection side, some of our improvements in security, but at the same time, threat actors are improving the way that they evade those detection techniques. So really important to consider that we're talking about internal, but also external threat actors.
So, Stacey, I think it's time for your poll.
It is indeed. Let's see if we can work the wonder of technology. So there should be a poll on your screen, fingers crossed.
Yeah, well, good. So
okay,
let's
cool.
see the numbers.
Oh, they're coming in.
Yeah.
Couple more seconds to get your votes in.
Can everybody see the summary, Stacey, or not?
No, not until we end. So
Okay.
couple more. Looks like the numbers just changed there. Okay, let's go. So you should now be able to see the results.
Hey, Paul. Good to have you on.
Oh, Paul, hey.
He snuck
So
in.
great.
Yeah, Paul snuck in.
I'm like that. I'm like a ninja.
Okay. So we've got a big proportion of the group do threat modeling, which is amazing. But I think, Omar, exactly what we wanted the numbers to show. Less of them do it at scale. And there is a fairly good split in terms of teams being accountable to actually mitigate the findings, which is nice to see. Normally, I think that number's reversed.
Yes, and I think that is important again for the purpose of the community, and to understand which or where you are in your organizations. It is very important for us because then we can start getting more clarity on what type of content or what information you will be willing to share. If you want to be also share best practices or what you're doing in your organization. So yeah, really great to see that many of you are already threat modeling, but it's just a matter of how do you get support from the C-suite and what else can you do to improve that.
Can we see the answer to question 5, Stacey? For me, it's just got how many people answered the words that they believe is challenging. You're on mute as well.
Oh, I can't see it here, but let me figure out if there's a way.
Maybe in the meantime, if people can just pop those words in our
in the chat.
Yeah, of why you think or what you think the challenges are when adopting threat modeling, whether that be for your clients or your organization itself.
Yes, Paul.
So I'm on my phone, so it take me forever to kind of type it in. But I just want to say, I think for me, it would be the buy-in, the initial buy-in from the stakeholders. What I feel and what I find is that they sometimes think it's like a telling off exercise, and like where it's completely the opposite. We want them to get stakeholder buy-in to understand that the root cause of threat modeling, which is to secure and
Yeah.
not to pull people up on what's already there. That's not the point. So but again, I think that's a culture and a mindset thing, and that's what I struggle with. I work in a large company, so yeah, trying to get that this is a good thing across sometimes is a barrier. So
And I think that comes to involving them in it as well, Paul, isn't it? Not just doing it and then
yeah,
telling them everything they've done wrong. Get the devs involved.
100%, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. So Omar, Claire's put it's a lack of understanding at times and the pressure with other deadlines and activities, which I think we can all agree. Everyone's got a huge to-do list of everything's needed right now. Not scalable and not repeatable. We'll cover that, Jagdeep, as well, because we need to then think about not just manually threat modeling, but doing it in a center of excellence style, because otherwise it won't ever be scalable and repeatable if you're trying to do it manually every time.
It's that comment from Alan is I'm actually involved in writing an assess or a guideline or a framework internally in terms of how to align to medical device controls. So each it also so part of the challenges as well is what are the constraints that each individual industry is facing, or because of regulatory requirements, or even the technology that we're using and the level of assessment that is needed in order to perform that. So some frameworks or compliant requirements are now requiring to run and do threat modeling as a mandatory requirement, and now that's shaping the need for running threat modeling, and to opposite to what Paul mentioned, and not necessarily from the culture point of view, but it's because it's coming directly from the direction of the organization. So yeah, really great to see that also that there are other drivers on why we're doing threat modeling and why we sometimes fail with that.
I think anything UK government mandates secure by design now, doesn't it?
Yes.
Which is nice. Okay. Fab. So just to quickly cover here, I'm sure you're all very familiar already, but for those of you that maybe aren't, the section at the top here, design, build, test, and all the way through to run, is our standard DevOps process. Now, threat modeling ideally sits in the design phase. That's when you get the most value from it. But there is nothing to stop you doing threat modeling at any of these other stages. It's just the knock-on effect is not quite as valuable. And what I mean by that is the outputs of threat modeling are designed to feed the rest of this pipeline. So if we then look at the build phase, firstly, we have to look at redesigning, and so we're not building in security vulnerabilities to start with. But equally, I now know what I should be a little bit more worried about, and I can configure certain tools in certain places to make sure that those threats that I've found are not making their way through. So if we think about putting secrets in code, that's a risk. Okay, well, I make sure that I've got adequate secret detection tools in place, and that helps me stop security findings going further to the right. The same is obviously true for DAST and IAS, but to call on pen testing here, we've had a lot of recent projects where the pen testers have taken the outputs of our threat modeling reports, they've taken the data flow diagrams that we've created, and they've been able to really attempt following some attack paths that we've created. Things we're concerned about, they've tried to make those threats true. And therefore, we can get a much better understanding of, has any mitigations we put in place worked? And what is actually the risk of each of these? Has the pen tester managed to really get through? So we can then have much better informed pen testing, and then not just going through a generic checklist in that way. Equally, the same is true for deploy and run. Threat modeling is all about visibility. So I now know things that if I can't fix something or I'm worried about it, great, okay, then my SOC need to have detailed monitoring and detailed alerting. If I'm worried about something, they need to not just turn on generic responses, but actually have a little bit of tailoring to what my application is, and then we've got a much better understanding. I'm just going to grab my door, Omar, and I'll pass you over.
Yes. So why threat modeling fails? So we know traditional threat modeling is often manual activity, time-consuming, static in nature, and this doesn't work in a today fast-paced or cloud-driven environment, right? So scalability is a huge problem. Manual processes can take weeks for a single application to identify or to perform the threat modeling activity. That creates bottlenecks in continuous delivery environments, because if we want to implement DevSecOps and be able to move faster, then sometimes the manual process doesn't help. We have a scarcity of security expertise. One security person for every 100, 200 developers doesn't scale. This means only critical applications have this level of attention. So we now live in this world where yes, we have resources prioritizing, and only the high or critical applications are relevant, but we leave the rest vulnerable. Then we have inconsistencies. Different people mean different interpretation of threat. That leads to non-standardized process, missed risks, and that also means that from the leadership point of view, it looks like we are not aligning the priorities as expected to what they did. And finally, rapid obsolescence. So we, as I've been saying, rapid or dynamic environments with cloud, agile, microservice architectures, introduction of AI. A manual threat model is just a snapshot in time, so it's not something that can quickly become or update or become updated very quickly. So it's outdated basically. So that creates poor integration. And if on top of that we add what we call the C-suite communication chasm, in a way that we're primarily bringing the technical jargon when we're bringing or having those conversations with them, and we don't bring the business value into our communication. So again, it's about the culture. So if when we talk to CISOs, you can identify if the CISO or the rest of the C level already have some technical knowledge in terms of what the security implications if there's a security breach. Sometimes they don't, and we need to kind of reduce that gap, because what it matters to them is what is the actual risk across the organization, rather than just the technical problem or any detail that we can provide in terms of the attacks or the techniques that the malicious actors are using. So making very clear or focus on how we communicate to them. And lastly, the cost center perception. So are we promoting or seeing or communicating directly to the C-suite that we are just operating security rather than providing value on top of what we're doing? So we face inadequate resources. If we don't communicate that in the right way, so we may have insufficient budget, we will be understaffed, and we don't have support from the board. And more importantly, when there's a situation, when there's a risk, without having that communication and defining, for example, how are we going to respond to an incident, and defining the best way to prevent that incident by using techniques like threat modeling, then we are exposing our team, because what will happen is our team will be the first one to be blamed for not securing their environments, and this is a very difficult situation for the leadership and the teams that are primarily trying to protect the organization. So yeah, we can move to the next one. So what actually works? So accountability is imperative. So what we mean by that is we need to embed that accountability and share that responsibility. If we are looking to move and implement DevSecOps, we know that we need to make sure that we introduce security in the right stages, as Katie mentioned. And this requires the transformation from traditional threat modeling into a continuous integrated practice that aligns with the modern development and security. And by doing that, what actually means is that we need to start thinking about two main concepts: cybersecurity or security by design, and DevSecOps. So security by design means security is baked in from day one, not an afterthought. Our ultimate goal is to prevent and not necessarily just detect. So we need and detection is important in the sense that we need to create and design the systems with the capabilities to be able to detect if there's an incident. So we have reliability integrated by design in our systems. On the second point, security by design, so we're talking about how do we identify the risk? Do we create some budget for security? And this is very important. By that, we don't mean, yes, we need to acquire all the technologies and then start integrating all the platforms with the best security products. What we mean by that is, are we considering that at some point security needs to be part of that process? So when we're designing a new system or a new application, are we integrating a security stage, a work stream, or even if it's just a validation check, just to make sure that we introduce threat modeling in some capacity. And lastly, accountability isn't about blame, So we're talking about clear ownership, consistent processes, measurable outcomes. And in order to get there, we need a structure of methodologies. We need some, as an organization, decide what works well for us. How are we moving the current approach that we currently have, in what are we going to embrace? And automation, I will say, so some people don't like, automation in the sense that we are not talking about replacing every single threat modeling activity with automated tools. The idea here is, can we move from static documentation to a more interactive way of reviewing the diagrams, reviewing the designs, the specifications? Are we doing continuous security process as part of that DevSecOps pipeline? And how we are introducing threat-led approach. So are we bringing aspects such as threat intelligence, security testing, anything that will support our decision making to make it faster, rather than just relying on our creativity just to figuring out what type of attacks we can protect. And the last point, regulatory alignment. So that's needed in order to build confidence and overall resilience directly to promote the trust from our customers. Because, as you know, regulatory requirements like DORA and others formalize the need to demonstrate this continuous accountability. Okay, so moving on. So to summarize that, I think one way, and I took this just yesterday from a recent post from Adam Shostak, who is kind of a familiar figure in the world of threat modeling, and the way that he approached this challenge, which is calibrating threat modeling with the C-suite vision. So for me, it's clear that we need to see threat modeling as an exercise of adapting and adjusting to what we think is convenient and important for the organization. So, and asking the question, should we actually threat model this or not, and to what level? So it's not an all or nothing type of approach. So we need to make sure that we transition from let's do threat modeling just for the sake of doing threat modeling to what's the right level of investment in security features. What do we need now in order to protect the application as we have it now, or as we envision is going to be operating? And then we by having that clarity, we will be able to communicate to the C-suite. But this is kind of the challenge. And now what we're going to see is, how do we actually approach that conversation? How do we recognize who do we need to talk to, and how do we actually make that happen?
Fab, thank you. And for those of you that do threat model the standard way, you might see that we've been a little bit cheeky with our line of questioning coming up next. We've split the next section into 4 key phases. So how we get the C-suite on board, who are we looking to impress, how are they impressed, so what's the metrics there, and then what have we done, what do we have to impress them, and then finally, have we done a good enough job? Let's just check round to see if the value we said we're going to get is actually coming true. So the first question then, who are we looking to impress when we get the C-suite on board? Every organization is different, but primarily, or before we come to that actually, there's 2 real methods here that we can talk about threat modeling, and each method of impressing your C-suite member will allude to one of these. So I think, Jag, you mentioned earlier that it's not scalable and not repeatable. That very much sits in the ad hoc and manual method of threat modeling. And for some organizations, that is absolutely fine. We don't need to make this war and peace in a huge, big process. That is a completely okay way of doing it. However, if you are a larger or more complex organization, we should look to the option of a COE for threat modeling. That might include the use of tools, although it can still be done manually. But more importantly, we have templated, we have processes, we have accountability. We have requirements for agree to build and agree to go live, and all of those things that threat modeling plays a key role in. So depending on the size and the complexity of your organization, each of these should fit respectively for you. So back to question number 1 then. This is also from the Areas Risk Forrester report. When you do have a threat modeling tool, for those of you that threat model manually, you will know that it actually does take quite a long time. By the time I've drawn the diagram, I've come up with the threats, And the threats I find are only ever as good as the security architect or developer who is coming up with those threats to start with. So it's as broad as the knowledge that's in your head. The benefit of using a tool is that you do get a much larger range and complexity of threats. But importantly, actually, that aspect of it, the creation of threats, the creation of risk, the creation of mitigation is automated. So from this report, you can take a threat model that would take 80 hours and it now comes down to about 8 hours. The manual side of it remains making the diagram and implementing those mitigations on either side of it. So there is a lot of value to be had from using a tool, again, dependent on the size and complexity of your organization. So who are we looking to impress? We've got 4 personas here. They're all a little bit different within different organizations, but I think generally, if you can impress some of these people, you're on to a good stead of getting the thumbs up to put threat modeling in your organization. So we'll go through each of these. How are these people impressed? What do they actually care about? The CISO wants to know, am I compliant? And if I've got an incident, how good is my team at responding? They are the one where if something goes wrong, they're going to be up all night with an awful lot of coffee and have to answer the questions as to why something has gone wrong. So they're really there to make sure, are we doing everything we need to be secure? You've then got the CTO, who's a little bit more adventurous in their technology roadmap, wants to make sure, are we competitive? Have we got all the skills we need? Should I be doing any more research? All those kind of things. Your CIO, very much concerned about your strategy, your operations, but importantly, who are you integrating with? Because the second I've got a third party or a SaaS service, I'm sending my data between myself and maybe a bank or maybe a database service, anything like that. Can I blindly trust them, or do I actually need to be having a little look at how my integrations between any third-party vendors are working as well? I think generally in the industry there is a lot of, oh, it's okay, they're secure, they're a SaaS. We sometimes need to look a little bit deeper on the responsibility model there. And then finally, you've got the product owner as well. So any projects, any delivery work that's going on, they're really concerned about timelines, about am I meeting this on cost, on time? I'm going to be the one that's in trouble if my delivery gets delayed. So each of these personas have a different opinion. So the question now comes, what do we have that's going to impress them? What can threat modeling do to help these people's job be even easier, or easier than it currently is today? So let's have a look at the CISO. They want to know, am I compliant? What's my risk? And is my incident response effective? Omar touched upon it earlier, and I think, Alan, you might have mentioned something as well. Sometimes you don't have a choice to threat model. If any framework or standard that you follow mandates threat modeling, then that's that option ticked for you as well. That is a quick win as far as we're concerned. We don't have a choice, we have to do it. But not a lot of guardrails are there just yet, as we kind of touched upon earlier. So we now have to push a little bit harder to get them to do threat modeling. When it comes to the risk perspective, when I threat model as a center of excellence, I now have a complete dashboard of what are my threats and what is the risk rating across my organization. Every project, we bring the whole thing together on a Jira dashboard or something like that, and I've got a really great understanding. But more importantly now, I can see where threats are continuing to pop up in a similar theme across different projects. So do I now need to go and do something as an organization? So for example, if I've got loads of SQL injection threats coming through, should I put in a scanning tool in my pipeline if I don't already have one? And we can solve this at the root of the problem. You also then have the question of, is my incident response effective? As we touched upon earlier, any threat that I find should go straight to the SOC as a monitoring use case. It should go in as a pen testing use case. So now I can be really confident that actually that SOC team know what they're talking about. I've had an awful lot of conversations with security monitoring teams where they actually are very disjointed from the developer teams. So it's like trying to lead them blind in a way. Let those two teams work together, educate them, let them see your data flow diagrams, let them see your attack paths, and they're going to be able to monitor so much better than they ever were before. So we now have a much better stance on from a CISO perspective. These are all really valuable things.
Something else to add there very quickly, and I think it's important that kind of sharing. So back to the culture aspect. So it's important to share for the architects and the developers to understand those threats identified by the SOC, but also we have to do it the other way around. So how much the designs, the decisions that are happening on when we are building an application are informed and notified to the SOC. So it's important that you understand what are the libraries that the developers are using, because some of the threats that are coming, or the attacks that will be expanding and the SOC needs to be dealing with at some point during an incident, will be related to that new technology stack. So I think that communication across those different teams is very important both ways.
Absolutely. The whole thing is visibility, really, isn't it? The whole thing is everybody on the same page? This is a really good thing from the Forrester report as well. This shows sort of the value in doing threat modeling, yes, from a tool, but actually I think this one here is quite interesting. You save an awful lot of money when you look at the whole scale of DevSecOps. So not only do you save money in automating and threat modeling, but further down this pipeline now, the remediation avoidance. So now we don't have to, if I find something early when I've only got pen and paper, as opposed to my pen test has told me about it, the effort and time and money required to rebuild something rather than just get it right to start with. That's where that significant saving comes in on here. And second to that is the compliance and reporting. We now have a really good understanding of risk. I don't have to go and purchase additional tools or XYZ or spend hours building dashboards when actually I have it at the very beginning and I can just keep that up to date the whole way through. So there's a lot of knock-on benefits that we sort of saw in the earlier slide. The next person that we want to have a look at impressing is the CTO, so the technical side of things now. I don't know if you're the same, but I often sit in a lot of threat modelings with clients where actually the developer's got one opinion of how it works, the architect's got another, and the QA tester's got another. And it's quite interesting when you bring the whole group together, you end up with a bit of a mismatch, and then you finally end up at the truth. So it's what's really valuable here is I now have a complete truth of a diagram. This is what is actually going on, not what my developer thinks they've built, but this is now the truth. So I can start building an asset inventory now quite well. The second side of this as well is how well are my team equipped to deal with things that we find? Do we have a skill shortage? When I ask for a mitigation to be put in place, do we have the correct tools and the skills? So that's quite key. We're pulling out all of these kind of points. And again, with the Center of Excellence side of things, are we finding consistent threats across the organization, like we touched upon earlier? When I've got that nice central dashboard of the whole organization, let me see themes of things that are going on. If I've got really bad repudiation threats coming through, I know I need to do something about my logging, and we can solve that organization wide. So again, it's that visibility.
There is a question.
Of course. Yeah.
Thanks, Omar. Thanks, Katie. Mine is slightly different. I'm not heavily involved in threat modeling. It's an area I find fascinating. But I have a couple of members of my team who are involved in threat modeling. And the experience with one of them at the moment is the threat modeling is being done as part of a rubber stamp exercise rather than genuinely arriving at the right conclusion. And he's finding it very frustrating to have to, right now, because of where he's positioned, to be part of that rather than really try to be more effective in front of the client. And I'm not sure quite where that fits. So on one hand, we can have it, it looks like we're making all the right moves, whether it's us or it's the client directly. But what do we do when we're in front of the client to ensure we genuinely are all pulling in the right direction and doing it properly?
I have two comments there. So the first question is, how much are you asking? So back to the question from threat modeling. So how much are you asking the clients? What do they care? So like, what are they protecting? What do they need to? What are they doing it in the first place? So
Yep. Sorry, go on, Omar.
yeah, so what that will then trigger will be where you might need to prioritize and start your that threat modeling exercise, because what matters at the end is identifying, first of all, that organization or in this case or your team know exactly where to start and what is how much do you think that they need to go further, because you need to just like you need to know how to start a threat modeling and why you need to do it, you also need to understand when do you know that you've done enough. That part of the cycle is important. We see that very common. I mean, every threat modeling conversation it's always the question, when do we stop threat modeling, and it's a matter of when you think that you've done enough. And so if you as a group, if you can bring that question and challenge the group to say, have we done enough? Is it something that is addressing the big concerns of the customer or the client? Are we really honestly thinking on all of the scenarios that are accessible to us based on our information that we have available at this time? That's when you start like making progress, because then someone will raise the hand and say, well, do you think we can actually we can do a little bit more, or we can wait until we complete this activity because we are not necessarily confident that what we're doing is in the right direction. So that's kind of for you to bring, or someone who again we're talking about the accountability, right? So someone needs to take that action and say, we will make sure we do as much as we can in order to complete the threat modeling exercise. But not sure, Katie, if you want to add anything else.
I think, Nessa, you're completely right, and I've had the same thing on multiple other projects. So getting it right is really difficult. But what I have learned is if you do this huge, big threat model in one go, it becomes a huge chore that you lose traction for, and then you end up with a huge to-do list after. It works really well when you do it really little and often. So, hey, I'm going to make a quick change. Let me and time box it. We're going to draw for half an hour. We're going to find threats for half an hour, and I'm going to put mitigations in for half an hour. Done. We move on, and the whole team do it together. The second you make it an overwhelmingly big user story, and it's a 2-day job, it's really hard to get people to see the value in doing it.
This and the scenario that I'm talking to me reeks of, we were engaged from a security perspective late.
Yeah.
The budget plans are already in place. The opportunity to effect change with those project plans and timelines was, well, you're late to the party, so they're already set.
Yeah.
And now it's, as you say, now it's a kind of, well, we can't boil the ocean, but we're actually not being effective either. So the situation that they're in, yes, there should be a kind of revisit, go back out to stakeholders. How do we make it more effective? But the team is struggling with how to try and get that to happen with the volume of work that they're also having to deal with. So it's a
catch-22.
It's a catch-22, and it is absolutely, well, not absolutely. It sounds as though being that bit later when engaged has led to this. So the guys are trying to get through it, but it's just not proving as effective right now, I think, is the right way to put it.
People don't want you interfering when they've already built it, because they go, I've already done it, leave me alone, let me crack on with my next task. You have to catch it when it's fresh.
And I think what they're also dealing with as well is the organization is quite siloed, and well, these are the apps that I use, and I'm not going to use the apps that you use because these are the ones I want, and my line of business is bigger than yours. So there's a whole host of other politics of the client going on that is also not unifying everybody to make the best use of these skills and this approach to arrive at the right conclusion.
The only other thing I can think that helps is visibility. So whilst they're doing the threat modeling, it's not going to work if they wait until the whole thing is done and then present it at the end. You want to have a dashboard where you have regular little catch-ups that say, hey, look, we're seeing a rise in this, we're going to do this about it. And that way they are constantly seeing the value. So that might help.
Yeah, good point. Yeah, good point. Thanks, Casey. Thanks, Omar.
Okay, cool. So that's the CTO side of things. You then sort of have the CIO. They really want to know, and maybe Nessa, this is pertinent to you as well, but the IT strategy and the operations and things like that. So again, visibility is a really big thing, but they also care about their vendors and suppliers. I do think we have a bit of a blind trust sometimes to things we integrate with outside of our organization. And you've always got to question the shared responsibility model. When I'm connecting to them, who's responsible for the encryption? Who's responsible for the logging? All of those types of things. So this is great chance to put your project here and anything you're integrating with on the internet or anything else. Start threat modeling what you've got going on between that trust boundary, because that's always quite an interesting time to find anything key. And just make sure that one of you is doing the security that is involved there and not just blindly trust it. And with that, I mean, with this whole big picture, when you've got a center of excellence, you have the capability to make really informed decisions at this point. I've now got a whole evidence behind me, so that if I want funding, I want more tools, I want more resourcing, I've now got a huge load of evidence and graphs and stats behind me that I can go to any provider with and say, this is why I need this is what I'm seeing, and here's my risk, basically. The final persona we wanted just to cover was the product owner. And Nessa, this is kind of big on your point as well. Threat modeling is just another task on the to-do list. If you think about it like that, it's another thing that everybody needs to get done. So you're now having to fight the battle of, why should that have my developers' time when I could get them coding instead? And the point is, if this is not something that you can show overnight, it's a really difficult thing. Return on investment for security is a really difficult thing to prove, because arguably you're saying, well, you've not been hacked, so therefore we're doing a good job, right? And those numbers aren't always that easy to come across. But over time, what we should be monitoring to show this value is the speed to deployment, speed to production. How long is it taking your dev team to start a project and get it into production? And over time, we should really see that come down as we do the security work at the beginning, because what you've then got is a whole reduction in rework that's going on. Trying to get that to them in a sentence is hard, but over time, if they trust you to start, the numbers speak for themselves at that point. So that's really key. Finally, the have we done a good enough job? And we've sort of covered this already, but what your C-suite or your investors should be able to take from this is a reduction in risk, right? We found things, we fixed them, therefore I've not got that threat live in production, or I've got it still, but it's at a much more manageable level for me. The SOC should start reporting a reduction in the number of malicious attempts that are successful, because we haven't got as many vulnerabilities that are exploitable. And again, the big one, the money saving is more effective time to release and things like that as well. So hopefully everybody wins, right? If threat modeling is involved.
Some other metrics just to consider
Yeah.
on top of them, which might lead into, so from the C-level perspective is, for example, remediation effort costs, right? So it's linked to the reduction of risk. So, but if we factor in how much effort or cost associated to the remediation, or the how much do we need to invest or spend in a remediation program? So because sometimes those issues will take longer, not just a single fix. So the more we can quantify the kind of the knock-on effect and the implications of not fixing that particular problem, then that's a key metric. Another one for external parties is the number of externally exposed services. So can we create a direct measure of all the different external attacks, and are we proving that by implementing this practice is reducing the threats? And third-party risk index or scores, right? So how much our threat modeling or efforts have detected a third party. So for the C-level, it's very important to understand any implication from third-party risk. It could be in the sense of technology, third-party risk on the technology that we're using, or just in the form of who am I dealing with, or who am I making business with because that could also be detected or identified as part of a threat modeling exercise.
Absolutely. Over to you, Emma.
Yeah, so I think what we're trying to do here and the summary is making sure that you are empowered to talk to the C-levels. You're already doing it, that you consider some of the metrics or the approaches that we suggest, but it's about having that reflection. We have very little time now, but we would like to hear from you in terms of how much threat modeling makes sense for you, and where do you see or have experienced the need to engage with the C-suite? Because the earlier you can do it, I think the easier you can achieve that. So yeah, in terms of next steps or call to action from our end, so in the next slide is basically start defining who is your champion or stakeholders who will be supporting you in that journey to start talking to the right stakeholders. As Katie mentioned, start small, demonstrate value, prove that what you're doing is in the right direction, and then slowly you will get support or from the C-level and bridge that communication gap, because it's important. Sometimes we need to develop that skill. It's something maybe if we are very technical, we don't necessarily like to talk too much, but we really need to understand the business a lot better.
And I think, Stacey, just there was a couple more questions on the poll, just to see if people feel confident now or more confident.
They should be on your screen now.
And for question 3, if you can pop them in the chat again, because I'm not sure we see them on the poll.
Yeah, I think everyone sees their own.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah, that's a learn for next time.
There'll be many.
Give it a couple more seconds for you to get your answers in.
Yeah. Just
Cool. And then you should be able to see the results.
Yeah, so it's good to hear. Yeah, people will feel more comfortable, or at least what we share is relevant. The second question, so will this approach persuade the C-suite? May not necessarily work. So I'm curious just to hear why do we think this approach may not necessarily be the right one? What would be the extra challenges that you will be facing? Anyone wants to share it on the call or in the chat?
I think I'll go first. So thanks for the session. It was really helpful. What I like to understand is obviously developers are good with developing. That's what they do best. Bringing them on the journey of threat modeling. What approaches have you both, used in order to actually start the process from scratch and then build upon that to a mature level?
Bring them in the threat modeling workshops, right? Get them drawing the diagrams, get them coming up with the threats. So it can't just be, hey, we found some stuff and we chuck it on the developer backlog. They need to have the context of why this is a threat to start with, and then they are much more involved. But equally, like you said, the developers are experts. They come up with some really great threats of of outcomes of insecure coding. So getting them involved in creating the threats to start with, they come up with an awful lot of really valuable stuff.
Yeah. for us. So just to share something that we do at Google is we bring as so it's part of the threat modeling is part of the kind of a career path or natural progression of a software engineer as they progress their career within the company, right? So the more senior they are, the more expectations the engineering team will put in them doing and building their skills in security in general, and that includes threat modeling. So by having educated and senior member of the or the staff able to answer security related questions within the team itself, then the more junior members will start seeing and learning that behavior and those questions and that approach early on. So that's Google. I know not every company will operate exactly the same. So what we do with customers or in other spaces where I've been working is it's about giving them that opportunity, right? Visibility of the threats, visibility of the workshops that we're running with threat modeling. Some of them are cool. I mean, it will be impossible to expect every single developer to have some security or develop that interest for security, but definitely you can find those individuals who could be champions and then start driving some of those conversations later on and bringing expertise from consultants at some point is needed when especially if it's in a siloed organization where there are very clear silos and broken into different teams and responsibilities, it's very hard to do it without help of someone else who can bridge the gap. So it will require a whole transformation of the team, but yeah, that's possible. It's just how to make that happen, and again, require support from the C-suite.
Perfect. No, thanks both.
Cool. So thank you very much, Katie and Omar. That was an awesome session. I know you put loads of work into the content, so thank you very much for everything. That was really interesting. As always, Threat Modeling Connect community is there for you. So join the forum, have some chats, share some knowledge. If you missed us in Barcelona, we will be in Washington, DC for ThreatModCon November 7th and 8th. And you can scan this QR code to join the community. And then if you are around next week, Paul is launching our Wales and Midlands chapter, which will go live on Wednesday. So I've popped a link into the chat. It'll be great to see you all there if you want to join. And from a London chapter perspective, we'll be back after the summer, hopefully with an in-person event and then some more virtual ones as well. If you've got any topics you'd like to see, please let us know. Feel free to drop them into the TMC forum or to reach out to us directly. And thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you. Yeah.
Thank
Cheers.
you.
Thanks,
Thanks,
everyone.
guys.